What's up, guys? My name is Zach, and today I am driving a 1988 Hyundai Excel. Up front is a 1.5 liter carbureted inline 4. Down below is a 4-speed manual transmission. Now, I am super excited to be driving this here Hyundai Excel because this was the first ever Hyundai sold in the United States. Now, there was the Pony in Canada that came a couple years before this, but this is the first official Hyundai to be sold in the United States, and Hyundai has become such a big brand that it's so cool to be driving their first ever car, at least here for us Yankees. But before we get on to anything else, I have a website, zackpradel.com, where you can buy stickers and other merchandise when it becomes available. You could also submit your own vehicle to be reviewed by me through a quick and easy submission form, and you get a video of your car just like this one. And you could read my behind the scenes blog to see what I'm filming before it comes out on the channel. But let's get back to that 1.5 liter under the hood. Well, it makes well under 100 horsepower. It's carbureted, and it's actually a Mitsubishi engine. So this car actually has Mitsubishi to thank for a lot of its parts. You see, Hyundai has been around for a very long time, but they were a manufacturer of goods and supplies. They weren't always a car maker. And so when they wanted to enter the car market, they had to reach out and ask for help for a couple of different things, one of which being the engine. So this shares an engine with the old 80s Mitsubishi Mirage, the Colt, and things like that. Like I said, paired to a 4-speed manual transmission, the clutch is paper light, and the shifter is actually pretty decent. It does go into gear, and you can feel the different gates and things like that, but it's not really sporty in any way. Now, you could also option this with a 3-speed automatic, and later they offer them even with a 5-speed manual, but this is the 4-speed manual, and it's quite the interesting experience today. Last but not least, of course, the Excel is front-wheel drive. So that's stuff out of the way. Let's talk about the interior. There's not a whole lot to talk about, but in front of me, I do have a couple of gauges. On the left is what looks like would be a tachometer, but since this was such a base model, it just has the lines and it says Hyundai, but you don't get the actual gauge. Hyundai said, screw you guys. In the center is the coolant temperature and fuel, and off to the right is my speedometer, of course, indicating 55 miles an hour because of the federal law. Off to the left on the gauge cluster, I do have rear defrost and 2 dead switches, and off to the right, I have my little snowflake icon and 2 more dead switches. So not many options here in the Excel. On the steering wheel, it just says Hyundai, and I have my horn button, which, by the way, the original American advertisements say Hyundai, so that's why I'm saying it that way today.
The affordable Hyundai Excel, just $54.99. Hyundai, cars that make sense.
Also, to the bottom right of the steering wheel, I do have my gauge dimmer switch, but also my intermittent wipers switch. Kind of interesting that it's its own little thing. Off to the left of the gauges, I do have a climate control vent, and that's it. And moving on to the door, I have my crank for my windows and my latch to get in and out. Moving into the center, I have a nice little Hyundai badge. I like that little distinction. 2 climate control vents and the climate controls themselves. Of course, this is not outfitted with AC because it was such a basic form of transportation, it didn't get it. Then I do have an aftermarket radio because most radios from this era were pretty garbage. Then I have an ashtray, cigarette lighter, and some extra storage options also labeled with the Hyundai name. I don't get any cup holders here in the Excel, so unfortunately but expected, the 1988 Hyundai Excel fails the big friggin' bottle test. Then I do have the shifter. It is a floor-mounted shifter. It's pretty tall. However, like I said, it feels good. And the shift knob, yeah, it's a little worn. It's a little cheap, but this was an entry-level car, you have to remember. So again, to be expected. Then I get the parking brake and the seats. Now, these seats are actually out of a Kia Spectre, or Spectra. Still haven't driven one, so I still don't know how to say it. So these are not the original Excel seats. However, speaking of seats, we do have back seats. So let's go do a backseat review. All right, so because of these Kia Spectre seats, I actually can't really get myself into the back. But let me tell tell you, the back seats are not fantastic. The plastics on the either side are very badly worn. They only get lap belts. They're not good. However, this was an economy car with a back seat. So that is definitely something to write home about, is the fact that it actually had back seats, and they would be usable if this car did have the stock seats. Like I said, unfortunately, it does not. All right, so we're on the back of the Hyundai Excel. Pull it up like that, and that's what you got. Now, it is pretty run-of-the-mill for hatchbacks of this era. You do get this nice privacy cover, but nothing really too interesting back there. It is a hatchback. Now, they did sell this in two-door hatches like this, or four-door hatchbacks, but this is the two-door hatchback. Pretty neat in here. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I love the blockiness of this car. I like the chunkiness. It looks very, very 80s. It's so weird seeing the Hyundai badge on a square, chunky vehicle like this, and I absolutely love it. I think overall it's a good looking car. Yeah, this one doesn't have the best paint in the world, but that's okay. I would rather review this Excel than no Excel at all, and these are really, really hard to find. This is my first time ever being near one, and that is really, really cool. So with that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. Why is this car so important? Well, back in the 1980s, there was a push for smaller, more economical cars. Of course, because of the gas crisis, American cars were starting to downsize and competing with Japanese imports. Japan kind of ran the four-cylinder scene throughout the 70s and 80s here in America. So much so that GM actually started rebadging Corollas as their own, which is funny. But with that craze came a little rat race of importing vehicles from other countries. There was 3 key vehicles involved in this little petition. First one was the Yugo, imported by Malcolm Bricklin, built in Yugoslavia. It was the cheapest car available on the market. Then there was this, imported from South Korea. Before this car, there had never been an automaker in America selling vehicles from South Korea. And then the third one was the Proton, which was imported from Malaysia. And I've yet to film one of those, so here's a Wikipedia stock image. But those 3 cars helped turn the tide on American buyers of maybe I have more options. When it comes to 4-cylinder economy cars, maybe it's not just the Americans and the Japanese, when in all reality, it was just really the Japanese. And so Hyundai came to the United States in 1986, selling this vehicle, the Hyundai Excel. And first year sales were amazing. This car actually broke records with the amount of vehicles it sold. Much like Yugomania around the same time, this car sold in droves. People loved the low price, the economical benefits of this car, and it sold like hotcakes. Now, as time went on, they had a lot of quality control issues, and I'll be honest, driving this one here today isn't really giving me all the confidence in the world. Like that. I think that's like a ball joint or something. I don't know. But this car gave Hyundai a footing in America. It allowed them to release a second car, a third car. And now, today, Hyundai is a fantastically large brand. They've spun off Kia, an entry-level manufacturer that's making really cool EVs right now. And also Genesis, which is making fantastic luxury vehicles. All of that was started with this car. This was the original. Without this, you don't get the Velociter N. Without this, you don't get the Genesis Coupe. Without this, you don't get the EV6. Or the Kia Soul, which a lot of people would probably rejoice in saying no Kia Soul, but I like the Kia Soul. But if we do want to turn the tables for just a brief second, this car is kind of the reason why Hyundai and Kia are still looked down upon today as cheap brands. Modern Hyundais and Kias are fantastic cars. I want that to be known. But people who grew up in the 80s remember Hyundai as this, a cheap econo box that didn't have the best reliability. So I want you to know now, having driven tons of Kias, Hyundais, and Genesis on the channel, they are far and away a completely different company than when they made this. But they couldn't make what they're making now if they didn't make this. Everyone starts somewhere, and it doesn't matter where you start. It only matters where you end up. Huge thank you to Brendan for letting me take out his Hyundai Excel. I was so excited to do this video because I have never ever spent time with one of these, and I was so glad he gave me that opportunity. He's been absolutely fantastic. We've been filming a couple of his vehicles here today, and he's been fantastic to work with. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.